Understanding the difference between survival mindset and an emergent mindset, it's important to understand it because it has a significant impact on how we navigate challenges and opportunities in our life. A survival mindset may cause us to react with fear, anxiety. We don't take change easily, and it leads us to focus solely on short-term solutions to problems. And it also puts us in a box wherein we start thinking in ways that are very zero-sum. On the other hand, an emergent mindset can help us see change, as an opportunity for growth and innovation. And it encourages us to approach challenges with openness and curiosity. So adopting an emergent mindset can lead to greater resilience, adaptability, and creativity, all of which are valuable, especially in the times that we're in. These traits are crucial in this fast-paced, constantly evolving world. So developing an emergent mindset requires a shift in perspective and a willingness to embrace change and uncertainty.
Self-limiting beliefs are the result of a lack of awareness. If you don't have an open mind to start, you get locked in on those beliefs. And there's that old saying that the neurons that fire together wire together. And ultimately, that leads to having these very rigid mindsets that are immovable in nature, right? Just because you get so used to thinking one way, it materializes and forms an entire belief system, whether that's in politics or the self-limiting beliefs that you have, and the inability to see that there is another side, to see that there's always a different perspective, that your own subjectivity is limited to a belief. And it all comes down to the mind being the same fickle beast that is constantly putting some kind of wrapper, let's call it an illegitimate wrapper, around a perspective that is ultimately malleable.
Nikos, how are you doing?
Dhiren, doing fantastic, my brother.
All right. So today I was thinking we could pick up from where we left off. And where we left off was the survival mindset versus the emergent mindset. Maybe we can dive into, what is the difference between the survival mindset versus the emergent mindset? What are your thoughts on the difference?
Absolutely. So the survival mindset comes from Darwin, ultimately, right? Survival of the fittest. And it comes from just being able to feed yourselves and feed your family from our Pleistocene ancestors on. And this still exists in the animal kingdom today, right? Who's the king of the jungle? It's the lion. It's who gets to eat what they want, when they want, right? And this has percolated into society today around capitalism, where ultimately the elites, the wealthy, get to eat what they want, when they want, buy what they want, so forth and so on, right? But it's very much based on scarcity. It's very much based on the limited supply of what's available based on the time that you can allocate to feeding yourselves, or as it relates to hunter-gatherer societies, people would spend literally all day trying to find food. Whereas over time, Pleistocene ancestors, upon the discovery of fire, you could pre-digest your food. And then that established culture, because now when you cook your food, it established kind of this social gathering of sorts when you can ritualize it. And now people could tell stories around the fire, in addition to a lot of health benefits as well, right? So you can, in order to basically take in all of the nutrients, you can cook your food. You're less likely to be susceptible to disease and all of that good stuff. But it exists in the animal kingdom, mitochondria, and the ability to basically adapt to changes within the environment such that only the strongest survive. So that has been going on for the longest time. And so that's the foundation of a survival mindset. Now, how does this impact what we're doing today in our day-to-day behavior? Some examples might be, well, in order to get that job promotion that I really want, I'm going to have to basically stab somebody in the back or step over somebody in order to get something done. I'm going to have to do something a little bit sneaky or conniving that has unethical moral practices just because I want to get ahead. So I would argue and make the case that our society has been built on top of that foundation, such that capitalism, and I am not anti-capitalism whatsoever. We're both entrepreneurs here, so I'm very much pro-capitalism, but about looking at both sides of the spectrum here. And that particular approach leads to not just a survival mindset, but a scarcity mindset, right? And now we're dealing with things like climate change, and we're learning that Mother Nature isn't giving all there is to give because now we're running out of our natural resources and things like that, right? So that's very much the survival mindset. The emergent mindset, on the other hand, is based on abundance. It's based on the fact that you can't quantify everything because Mother Nature, and by virtue of the universe, is eternally giving and eternally provides, and ultimately has unlimited potential in terms of what you can access from both a resource standpoint and also from how that impacts your mindset and how you carry about in going about your day. So basically, the abundance mindset is the emergent mindset because it's a phase shift and it's literally a perspective shift in how you're thinking about approaching your life, and it's very profound, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it as well.
Yes, there's a lot to unpack in your distinction. So for me, the difference is, or understanding the difference between survival mindset and an emergent mindset. Well, it's important to understand it because it has a significant impact on how we navigate challenges and opportunities in our life, right? A survival mindset may cause us to react with fear, anxiety, right? We don't take change easily. And it leads us to focus solely on short-term solutions to problems, right? And it also puts us in a box wherein we start thinking in ways that are very zero-sum, which is something that you mentioned, right? In terms of, having to pull someone down in order for you to get that next promotion. On the other hand, an emergent mindset can help us see change as an opportunity for growth and innovation. And it encourages us to approach challenges with openness and curiosity, right? So adopting an emergent mindset can lead to greater resilience, adaptability, and creativity, all of which are valuable, especially in the times that we're in. These traits are crucial in this fast-paced, constantly evolving world, right? So developing an emergent mindset requires a shift in perspective and a willingness to embrace change and uncertainty. So that's how I see the distinction. Now, how do we do this? How do we develop an emergent mindset? Now that we've covered the distinction, let's get into the how.
I think the first foundational principle is developing awareness. I would say open-mindedness, self-awareness is one, but just pure awareness, which is more coming from the roots of Eastern philosophy. And there's definitely, that's a whole rabbit hole in itself, but we could start to plant the seeds for that. The distinction between Eastern approaches to solving challenges or just basically living versus Western philosophies is the distinction between surrender and force. And you need the yin and the yang, you need both, because that's really the nature of reality as it exists today, as presented to us by the universe. In order to be more aware, and it's not just being open-minded, right? The danger between open-minded, and I won't even say danger, but open-mindedness really helps. But you're focusing on the moment, you're surrendering to the moment, and you can basically go either which way the universe takes you, you can get swept up into it. The challenge with that is that you tend to throw away plans and strategies. But having a combination of both is the key. But awareness, self-awareness, and just awareness of your surroundings starts with a perspective that anything could be both. Any scenario that happens, and this might open up some controversy, whether it's a death in the family.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. Take, for instance, a person losing their job. It's devastating. It's a punch to the gut. It's a blow to the ego. You get taken off your high horse. And I could relate this back to, what happened to me, circa 2018 or so, when I thought I was like at the very top of the tech industry as this futurist AI evangelist, and then kind of got knocked off of my pedestal and then didn't know what to do. And I had to go inward for literally the entire, 2019, trying to figure out my next move, which was the dark night of my soul. But if that didn't happen to me, if my ego wasn't blown, I wouldn't have the awareness to go inward and to really create the space for it. But it starts with this duality. And I will say duality because every scenario that happens, any instance in life, any occurrence is tainted with both. It's both good and bad. Everything that happens to you is completely neutral. And you can see things from both perspectives always, because that's just the way nature works, and that's the way the mind works. The mind has a tendency, it will always split things into two, which is why we have binary opposites of one another when it comes to energy forces. There's good and evil, good and bad, dark and light. It exists in absolutely everything. So not to unpack that too much, because there's a lot to get into there, but really, when the mind splits something in two, you now become aware of what is emergent, which is the thing that emerges from those two opposing forces, right? So same person loses their job. Oh, this is the worst thing in the world. But the emergent mindset says, as soon as that happens, why is this the best thing in the world, right? So as soon as you lose your job, you immediately make that phase shift and say, okay, me losing my job is the worst thing in the world. Me losing my job is the best thing in the world. What happens? Something emerges from that. And then there's something that takes the two dual opposing forces, and usually a new opportunity will open up. Law of attraction starts to come into play, and all of the squishy stuff that we talk about when it comes to inner game. So that's what's most interesting about the emergent mindset.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So one thing that I picked up from what you just shared is reframing, right? Reframing setbacks as opportunities. And I don't think we do this enough. The art of reframing a situation. Instead, we see it as a failure or as a reflection of our abilities, right? We view it as as a reflection of who we are and what we can bring to the table. Recently I was invited to give a keynote, and this was going to be the biggest stage that I've spoken, or I would have spoken on. There were going to be about 3,000 people in the audience, and I was asked to submit a proposal. And I worked on this proposal for a couple of weeks, and in the end, I didn't get it. And the first thing I did, which in the past I would not have done, but the first thing I did was I asked, so the first thought, before I share with you what I did, the first thought was, I felt like a failure. I felt like, not getting that gig was a reflection on my ability, right? But then I quickly got on the phone and I asked for feedback. And I quickly learned that the proposal that I submitted, based on what they were looking for, there was someone else who is actually someone I know of. That person, that speaker, was a better fit. And there's another keynote that's coming up in 6 months Same number of people in the audience, very big opportunity for me to be on that stage and to spread my message. So I'm really excited about that. But they've given me that opportunity. Now, had I not called and asked for feedback, I would not have come to that conclusion, or I would not have found out what I found out, which was it wasn't about my ability. It was just about something that was not a good fit for me at that moment, and there was someone else that was a better fit. So this whole idea of reframing setbacks as opportunities for growth, because what I learned from that is that my proposal was actually very, very sharp. It was it hit the right buttons, but it wasn't the perfect fit that they were looking for, right? And it also helped me refine my message going forward on how I present myself. So there were a lot of learnings that came from that rejection. Yeah, so reframing is something that I've found to be very, very valuable. And
Absolutely. And
definitely
yeah,
a core piece to the emergent mindset.
yeah, absolutely. I'll just riff off of that just because if you could dynamically reframe absolutely everything in life, I think that is the ultimate way to unlock the emergent mindset, because the mind is a very fickle thing. You will always get wrapped up in a very specific perspective. And this happens in the brain because the neurons that fire together wire together, right? So if you think about how small micro decisions end up becoming entire belief systems that are very rigid in structure, such that it is virtually impossible to change somebody's mind about something, whether it's a political belief or self-limiting beliefs, how they can't change their health, how a 400-pound person says, I'll never get thin, I'll never get fit, I'll never do this, I'll never do that. Those become very much ingrained in your entire mindset. And that's the old saying, right? Either way, you're right, because you are literally creating your own reality with your mind. So that unlocks so many different things in terms of not just reframing a situation. It's you can literally make up anything you want, and you can make yourself believe it such that you can create your entire world. But there's also some danger in that, because if you get down the path of kind of this negative thinking, stinking thinking, as we like to call it, then you also make that a reality as well. So that's part of the emergent mindset, when you kind of hold those two pieces together at the same time, and then hopefully what emerges from that is something much greater than what you started with.
Why do people struggle seeing the silver lining? Why is it that we are not able to reframe as quickly as we should, and instead we start this negative narrative on we're not good enough, or we're not smart enough, or all the lies that we tell ourselves? Do you think it's the limiting beliefs that you were talking about that holds us back from it? Are these the programs and the conditioning that we've been through on our journey?
Absolutely. I feel like self-limiting beliefs are the result of a lack of awareness. If you don't have an open mind to start, you get locked in on those beliefs. And there's that old saying that the neurons that fire together wire together. And ultimately, that leads to having these very rigid mindsets that are immovable in nature, right? Just because you get so used to thinking one way, it materializes and forms an entire belief system, whether that's in politics or the self-limiting beliefs that you have, and the inability to see that there is another side, to see that there's always a different perspective, that your own subjectivity is limited to a belief, and it all comes down to the mind being the same fickle beast that is constantly wrapping, putting some kind of wrapper, let's call it an illegitimate wrapper around a perspective that is ultimately malleable. There is nothing that is so rigid. There are certain forces in life that like gravity, certain facts, but now, facts, stories, narratives, the stories that you tell yourself are ultimately malleable as well. But these self-limiting beliefs ultimately start with having that lack of awareness that can lead you to ultimate opportunities, right? So also drawing the distinction between rigid perspectives and the imagination. You always can, the most cynical people are looking at something. And I was watching, this great show the other night with my girlfriend, and I still get in the bad habit of going down the path and looking at things and not seeing what other people see, like the imagination of children, right? We were looking at this, this scene, and she was like, "Oh wow, look at how beautiful, that scenery is," and I'm like, "Oh, it's a construction site." And she was like, "No, but look at the grays, the nature, the contrast. It's beautiful." And she literally goes, "You have no vision." And I'm like, "You're right. I don't have vision. I couldn't see what she was seeing, just with respect to, she saw a beautiful, majestic painting, and I was looking at this like construction site, and that just, shows that we have very limited perspectives in what we can see. And this is the same reason why children have an unlimited imagination and utilization for what they see in front of them. And that's why children are the purest, and they can experience things and be in the moment. And the older you get, the more rigid your mindset is. So it all comes together to form a self-limiting belief. And it is because of the lack of awareness and that you have those belief systems.
So this is really interesting because on a number of occasions, we have landed on this idea of self-awareness. As a writer, has that been a gateway or an access point to you raising your self-awareness? Has writing helped you in being more self-aware, Nikos Acuna, is my question.
Yes, amazing exploration. Writing, by virtue of the craft and process, is it's the pure creative expression of thoughts, feelings, experiences with regard to turning electrons into atoms. And there's something very freeing about that. It can be used to purge. It can be used as a therapeutic element to explore aspects of your life. The danger in that is that it's also embedded in thought. And so when you're looking at something and being free of all this, there's only one ultimate technique to be free of all this, and that's meditation. And we can get into that a little bit later as well. But in order to be more self-aware, the act of writing, I would agree, I think with where you're going with it is a form of self-expression that leads to self-awareness as a result of that process, but you have to go through it. Most people, they let the thoughts linger in their brains without exploring something. But how often have you journaled and then looked back at your journal to see how far you've gone, or to see a perspective that you no longer hold? Which is why it's very important to document all of those things, to basically create the space of who you want to be relative to who you are today. And there's something very freeing about it. There's something very cathartic about it. But I'd say, yes, writing has been an incredibly important foundational facet in my life. Even if nobody else reads it, I go through the process just because it helps me explore who I am. And then I start to unlock the very nature of my own growth as a result of it.
Yeah, my mentor always tells me or reminds me that he says, Darren, when you have a thought, he hasn't said this to me in a while because I think I've gotten better at this over the years. But he said, whenever you have a thought, and let's say it's a negative thought, right? A fear-based thought. Whatever you're doing, if you're, driving your car or you're on a bike or you're whatever it is you're doing, stop it. Stop whatever you're doing and write it down because that thought did not come from the ether. It came from your head. It came from inside you. And when we don't write it down, what we're essentially doing is we're brushing it under the proverbial rug, right? We're sweeping it under the carpet. And anything that's swept under the carpet starts rotting. So he always says, whatever it is, whatever you're doing, make sure you write it down and reflect on it because that's going to be an access point to your next level because it's a fear-based thought. And meditation is really interesting because, everyone talks about meditation and how important it is to meditate. I've started looking at meditation in a very different way now. I mean, instead of, it's quite trite, right? I mean, meditation, people say, sit there and watch your thoughts. But I've started looking at it as a debugging mode, right? And I've started watching my thoughts go and just not wrestling with it, but just listening to the monologue. And through that process, I'm able to get to this inbox, this mental inbox zero, and process all those thoughts. And, this took a number of years to do, but I feel like, journaling and meditation together is the access point to a higher level of self-awareness as an emergent mindset. So just tying this back to the emergent mindset, we spoke about the distinction between survival and emergent, and then we spoke about how. And these are two ways three. We talked about three things to do. One is meditation, and we spoke about journaling, and we touched on reframing, the importance of reframing. Anything else that you'd like to add to that from an emergent mindset perspective?
Yeah, I love that you touched on this concept of metacognition or the metamind, where you have awareness of your own thoughts as they are coming into your head. Therefore, you become a transcendent consciousness, not to get too squishy about it, but you're literally transcending your thoughts because you can observe them. And you kind of put them in a box and say, you know what? I am not just my thoughts. I am more than my thoughts. I am the totality of my identity and my experiences as it connects with everything else that is in front of me, behind me, my past, present, and future. And then you get into kind of like these very, very deep meta states, like when you get into deep Om, that the very advanced yogis and Buddhas kind of come toward those stages where they're just like pure bliss and enlightenment, where they're just radiating this energy. And none of that is thought-based, right? It's absolutely zero thought. It's just pure, vibrant energy radiating from them all day long. But to apply that into aspects for how you lead your life and come to certain decisions, that's very different because that becomes thought, action, thought, word, deed. A thought happens and then you need to materialize that. You need to write it down. But the act of freeing your thoughts from this by virtue of meditation really becomes kind of this self-perpetuating feedback loop. And I think that's what emergence is. It's ultimately this feedback loop that starts to understand itself. And that's what's happening with AI right now. Not to get too macro about it, but when you have these recursive models that are becoming aware of themselves and start to program themselves, if you think about how the brain works, we're looking at these neurons are basically distributed systems running a parallel process through which we experience things, have thoughts, everything that we experience based on our cognition. It works very much the same way, is that once a system starts to gain awareness of itself, it becomes that very transcendent function, and it leads to very, very big phase shifts in our existence, like consciousness, societies, world religions, spirituality. So yeah, it becomes a very deep topic very, very quickly once you apply these emergent mindsets, because you become more aware of all of these inner workings that ultimately connect us to one another.
Well said. So I think we are done for now. We've covered a very crucial distinction between the survival mindset and the emergent mindset. Anything else that you'd like to share before we put a bow on this?
No, I'd actually just like to kind of point it back to you, and tying that to some of the themes that we unpacked in the first episode. How have you experienced yourself? Like, is there a recent emergence in your life that was, it doesn't have to be like crazy phase shifting. It could have been, when you did an Ironman or something like that. But do you, how aware are you of these emergent phase shifts as you grow, kind of at this stage in your life?
Every day is different. It's hard work being aware at every moment. But as I get on this journey of self-development and trying to be the best version of myself, I feel like I'm getting closer to being aware more often than I was yesterday. So every day is different because the challenges get bigger, right? Our dreams, our ambitions are constantly growing, and so we have, we don't. One thing I've come to learn is that we don't get to a point wherein we're so aware that we don't need to be more aware of ourselves because we're constantly changing. How deep is the rabbit hole? Well, the question is, how deep do you want to go, right? And so for me, I've been on this quest to be the best version of myself, not in it's quite trite where everyone says that, be the most authentic version. I actually think that it's a myth to be authentic, right? We can't truly be authentic because authentic to who? We're constantly evolving, right? Who I am today was not the same person I was last week. And who I'm going to be in a week is not the same person I am today. So the whole notion of authenticity is all about being authentic to my thoughts at this moment and being really objective and not judging them, right? I think the phase shift, to answer your question, really comes down to being more compassionate to myself and knowing that it's an infinite game that I'm playing. And recently, I've made this conscious effort not to subscribe to the whole, hustle mindset of, always going, never stopping, work, 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 and, going after it constantly, to this mindset of, it's going to come, right? We spoke about, in our conversations, we talk about Dr. Joe's work, and that's had a profound impact on me. And going into the feeling of having what it is that I'm going for, right? Just being in that space wherein it's done, like it's actually now a reality. How would you feel about that outcome being a reality in your life today, Dhiren? And really embodying that feeling is that phase shift that I've been working on.
I love that. And yeah, not to tie too clean of a bow to it, because this is the very exploration of what we're getting into with this series. But I'd like to pose a potential thesis around emergence, the emergence mindset, or the experience of emergence, perhaps being the result of the alignment between what's going on in your inner world as a perfect reflection of your outer world. So I'd like to leave our listeners with just that thought, and then maybe unpack that in the next episode.
That sounds great. All right, Nikos. This was, I feel like I'm in a brain spa. But thank you for the conversation, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening.
All right. Love it. Next spa day coming up.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to Emergence Now, where we explore the emerging trends, technologies, and ideas that are shaping our world today for you to discover yourself. We hope you have enjoyed this episode and gained valuable insights that you can apply in your own life. If you want to stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media, where we share additional content, engage with our community, and keep the conversation going. Thank you for listening to Emergence Now, and we hope you will join us for the next episode.